Gold Trails and Ghost Towns with Mike Roberts and Bill Barley.
Welcome to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. We've decided to leave the cabin behind and come down to a river to see whether or not we can get a better feel for the kind of work that the prospectors did on all those different locations that we've been talking about on this program. I'm Mike Roberts with Bill Barley, who's been our tour guide for these many, I guess 13 different gold trails in Ghost Town. What river have we chosen to take a look at?
Well, it's called Mission Creek today, Mike, and it's one of the little tributaries of Okanagan Lake, just to the east of Kelowna. But at one time it was a river, Rivière Laurence Sable, which meant sandy cove. And that was when the French Canadians were in this area. They were employees of the Hudson's Bay Company, and they discovered this particular creek was gold-bearing in the late 1850s, probably 59 or possibly 1860. And surprisingly enough, although it isn't in a noted gold belt, it yielded a significant quantity of gold.
So in this program, maybe we'll actually find some gold, real gold of our own.
I think we'll find some flood gold that comes down every year in this creek.
All right. We'll be back in just a second to get our hands dirty, tell a few of the stories about the people who did find gold here on Mission Creek, and generally today go over a few treasure stories we missed out in the past year as Gold Trails and Ghost Towns continues. Back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. Mike Roberts with Bill Barley on the banks of Mission Creek. Some people made some money. They didn't get rich here, but they made some money out of Mission Creek.
Well, we don't know how well they did. We do know that the first miners here in 1860, 61, 62, right up to about 1868, did well, up to an ounce a day. Then they moved out, and of course the Chinese, who were the best placer miners in the business, Mike, they came in and they worked not only at Mission Creek itself, but some of the tributaries. And they used hydraulics, which is kind of, they're called giants. They're kind of a water gun that washed down the gravel banks.
Water monitors, you
That's
called
right.
In another program.
Yeah, they're a monitor or a giant or a hydraulic. And they stayed here for a number of years. And then after the Chinese left, when the ground was not rich enough for them, you had the odd individual coming in. Old prospectors like old Dan Gallagher, and Gallagher Canyon, of course, is named after him.
Well, that's essentially where we are, just a bit east of Gallagher's Canyon, right at the foot of Layer Cake Mountain. This is an area which has had people panning it and panning it. What did you find appealing about this spot?
Well, there's several things. One, it's in the gold section of the canyon. Now, we don't know where the gold came from, Mike. You know, usually you can find the original deposit of the gold. It's usually local origin, but in Mission Creek, there's some controversy over it. It seems to be that it probably comes under an ancient channel that runs under part of the town of Kelowna. The city of Kelowna is the Rutland area, so it probably comes through from Rutland, through from Wood Lake.
Gee, when you look at the country now, Wood Lake is downstream from everything. How could gold run upstream from here? What's changed?
Well, I mean, cataclysmic changes, you know, in the eon since the gold was deposited here, and what we will be getting today probably is just flood gold out of that old run. So and a number of people are looking for this, for the origin of the gold in Mission Creek.
Yeah.
Unsuccessfully, I might add.
Well, maybe we'll find it today. We have a huge boulder behind us here. Where does a prospector like yourself, a placer miner, look for gold? Well,
You would look on a bar or a bench, and we have a couple right behind us. The large boulder in view would be an ideal place to pan, but it's difficult for us because we're not in scuba gear. So you'd take a smaller rock right on the bench itself and dig downstream on the downstream side of that smaller rock, because the actual water, when it's higher, creates kind of a back eddy, and some of the gold will deposit there.
Just getting back to your scuba gear, I hadn't thought of that. I'm still thinking of rubber boots and gold pans, but if you had scuba gear, you could go underwater to the base of this rock and start getting the gravel out there.
Yes, it's technically illegal, but it has been done in a number of places in British Columbia.
Because of the siltation that it would happen in the stream?
Yes, it can affect a good fishing stream, and it should be well monitored, I think.
Now, this area is not on some sort of a gold sequence. What did you call it?
It isn't in the designated gold areas in the province, so that you could not actually stake this ground unless you went through an order in council. And this ground, which is kind of interesting, was originally owned by the Indians. They have now purchased this ground back again, so we're actually on Indian ground again.
with their permission, I might add.
Oh, yes, indeed.
Okay. Well, let's go and find one of these rocks that we can dig behind downstream of and see whether or not we can come up with some of that elusive gold stuff.
Nice day for prospecting.
Hey, when you walk up a creek, what separates one rock from another as far as you're concerned?
Well, you look to see what type of ground it's on. There shouldn't be too much sand. There should be gravel. The rock should be big enough to retard the current or affect the current in some way. Should be on an inside band unless it's a bar. A number of things. You're looking for flat wash. You're looking for
flat wash,
which is a flat rock rather than rounded rocks. You always look for that in placer gold.
What does a flat rock do? Does it just disturb the water better?
No,
or?
It doesn't. It indicates that you're probably on a tertiary channel. That is a pre-glacial channel originally.
So if you've got round rocks, you're on a real old channel, and...
No, yeah, but the flat rocks would mean you're on an older channel.
Yeah.
So that's always a good sign. You look sometimes for cemented gravel, sometimes for oxidized gravel, that's coppery color or rusty colored gravel.
All right. Well, we look like we found a reasonable specimen. Where do you start to dig? Do you in front of it, back of it, side of it? Where's the best spot?
Well, if you find a big rock sitting on a bench, you'd go behind the rock, the downstream side of the rock, and dig under it. That would be your best part to start prospecting.
Now, as you go down, do you expect to find some on the surface gravel behind it, or where do you begin to think you're going to come up with something?
On this creek, Mike, which has been well mined, as most creeks have been in the province of British Columbia and in the Northwest generally, you're hoping for flood gold. That is some gold that has been carried down by fresh water in the spring or high water.
So it would be fresh gold. It could have come down in the last year,
the last
25 years.
Well, probably last year, because you assume it's been gone over every year. And you'd look in the top few inches of the gravel, maybe top 18 inches. Varies with the creek. Sometimes only the top 3 inches. What do you do first? You mix it in well, Mike. Make sure that the water is getting right to the bottom of the pan.
I can just see flakes leaping out of there. You're
Not
being
really,
so rough.
you can. And you pan upstream against the current so that if any little flake's going to escape on you, the current's going to pick it up and bring it back in. And this riffle is designed to keep the fine gold in there. And I'm using my left hand to get rid of some of the rocks, which if you're panning right, come to the surface.
And even though a rock like that you just threw out is so much heavier than one of those little tiny pieces of gold, in comparison to its size, the gold will sink and then it'll just get flipped out.
That's right. It's all specific gravity is what it is.
Would the old pioneers and prospectors have really used a pan at the beginning, or would they have rocker boxes?
No, always the pan. This was the prospecting tool. You know, I mean, this is the tool they had to use. And they'd use different pan. They use a straight lip pan. This is a riffle pan. And and sometimes they'd put in a series of riffles with a nail and pan, through a series of riffles just to make sure they kept the fine gold. When we get down to here, Mike, we start tailing the pan.
Now you went through, what was in there, about 25 pounds of rock and gravel?
About 15 to 20 pounds, yeah.
And you went through that in
a few seconds.
Yeah.
Oh, under 2 minutes, yeah. I mean, you can go through it faster, but...
You were left in there with just a few ounces of the stuff.
Pretty coarse color right there, too, you see.
Yeah.
And some more coarse colors coming up underneath.
Yeah, really quite a pile of them.
Yeah. And a few garnets, which are indicators.
Now, if this was the Similkameen, you'd even find some platinum in there.
Yeah, you would.
Maybe you'd find it on.
There's another dozen colors in there, you see.
Well, maybe I'll try my hand at panning the next one.
I think you should.
All right. Bill, I'm washing more gold out of this pan. I can feel it.
Oh, yeah. Make sure you use lots of water in it, Mike. And remember, it's kind of a forward motion, too.
Look at that. I can move stuff out of here at the time.
And remember, you bring that water right back in the pan. Right back in the pan. It's good there, Mike.
Go ahead, Honor Bill.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, she was a little tight in the bottom, so you might have lost it there. We'll see.
Big one hiding behind that.
Yes, sir. Getting some coarse stuff now. Oh, that's of course the standing up.
Is this what the old prospectors found when they first did?
Yeah, this would be good pan for them.
Is that right?
Oh yeah.
They would stay here.
Oh yeah, they'd say, hey, that's good enough showing for me.
When
And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 colors in that pan.
And bigger than the last.
And yeah, oh yeah, we're getting.
Now, what are some of the things you're going to find in the pan anyway?
Well, you'll find in Mission Creek, the creek we're on now, just gold. And sometimes gold with mercury, which looks like silver-colored gold. There'd be mercury right on it because of the fine gold in the creek. In the Similkameen district, you would find platinum. In other districts, you would find a strange metal called electrum, which is half gold and half silver. Doesn't occur in many districts either, nor does platinum for that matter.
But in Mission Creek, just gold. You find some other little anomalies around the edges, which are kind of appealing in there. Are they signs that you're on the right track?
Yeah, well, you're talking about garnets, which are sometimes called poor man's rubies, and they are kind of precipitated iron, so they're fairly heavy. That's why they stay in the pan, although they are translucent. So if you find garnets in your pan, quite often you'll find gold in the same pan.
When do you start taking some care? I mean, how much you got a teaspoon, or how much stuff left in the bottom before you start taking some care?
Well, it takes an experienced eye, Mike, and I would say that in this creek, if you get half a dozen colors to the pan, you're getting 5-10 cents a pan, which is pretty good. Because you can, if you pan significantly and fairly hard, you can pan 40 or 50 pans an hour if you're right at the source. Mm-hmm. So you could do fairly well. You'd have a few dollars worth at the end of the day.
Now, these pans that we've been panning out here seem to have been coming up with some pretty good gold. How far under this rock can we go to continue to improve our chances?
Well, of course, you would like to go to bedrock, which is an impervious layer somewhere in the depths of the creek. And you would like to have stepping bedrock that comes into the creek like this, fairly shallowly. It doesn't occur at this spot, so we only got gold down for maybe a foot down on this particular bar.
We're not finding any nuggets here, Bill.
Because we're not on bedrock, Mike. You have to go to the bedrock. In about 95% of the cases in most of the creeks in British Columbia, unless there's a hard pan, which is a false bedrock, that is a very hard clay layer, sometimes that'll hold the coarse gold or the nuggets too. But usually it's on true bedrock.
Were you expecting to find this much gold in this little spot?
Frankly, I was a little surprised that we got as much as we did, because we didn't salt any pans except for the 2 nuggets which we indicated at the time. But the rest of that just came out of the gravel as it was. And we were averaging about 12 to 14 colors a pan, and some of them were significant. So I think it was good panning.
You mean they were heavy colors?
Yeah, fairly heavy colors.
And now we've got in front of us here a pan. You want to do the honors here, because I just feel like such a
this is called
here.
This is called tailing the pan, Mike, and I'll show you the results in a moment here. And this is the result of about 9 pans. And there's a couple dollars worth of gold there, so it's fairly good.
Now that's what we managed. All of that there is what we managed to get out of Mission Creek
in 9 pans.
A creek that's had a lot of action.
Oh yeah, it's been mined since over 1 1/4 centuries.
What we didn't find was one of those.
Yeah, that's about a 3/4 of an ounce nugget of gold, and the smaller one there is platinum, and we salted the pan with those to show people how they come up in the pan.
I can see a guy getting a lot more excited about that than that, but that's pretty exciting all on its own.
Definitely, and look at the difference in the color. The Mission Creek gold has a little more copper in it, and that Similkameen gold has a touch more silver in it.
Okay. Well, over the past 12 programs, we've talked about treasures an awful lot, but we've left out some. We've left out hundreds. After we come back from a break, will you tell us a couple of treasure stories?
Yeah, I'll tell you a dandy, Mike, and surprisingly, it's not only about the Kelowna area, it involves this creek and the canyon in it.
A treasure story from right here on Mission Creek when Gold Trails and Ghost Town continues after these words. Back to Gold Trails and Ghost Towns. I'm Mike Roberts with Bill Barley on Mission Creek. The lost McLean mine, right near here somewhere.
Yes, very close to the city of Kelowna and Mission Creek. Somewhere. Now, maybe 10 miles, Mike. It may be 15 miles. It may be 2 miles. We don't know.
Who is this man, McLean?
McLean was a West Bank Indian, an Okanagan Indian, lived on the west side of Okanagan Lake on the West Bank Reserve, came across the lake into the city of Kelowna, and would leave from the city of Kelowna out the old Barley Stretch, which was on the northeastern part of Kelowna, and head for the Mission Creek Canyon.
Now, Barley Stretch would obviously allude to somebody who was using your name. Or...
Yeah, it was my great uncle. He was a pretty good guy.
Now, the process of getting a boat, would this be his own boat, or would he come across the boat, a ferry boat? Or
sometimes he would just roll across.
Ostensibly to come to town.
That's right. He usually didn't take a sternwheeler. He would usually just roll across, as the Indians were prone to do in those days.
When did people become aware that he was coming back with some gold of some description?
A lot of hearsay evidence, but consistent evidence and persistent evidence over the years. So he disappeared up that maze of the Mission Creek Canyon, and somewhere in that vicinity, probably northwest or northeast of the Mission Creek Canyon, he came across an area that had free gold in it, that is placer gold. And he came back with small quantities and then significant quantities of placer gold. It was universally nugget gold and coarse gold, naturally, which nugget gold is inclined to be. And he would bring it back in a leather poke and spent evidently rather freely both on the reserve and the city of Kelowna.
Well, this would obviously come to the attention of everybody in town pretty quickly.
Yes, but it wasn't unusual, Mike, for Indians or for other people in the area to come back with gold. There was gold in White Man's Creek, there was gold in Siwash Creek, there was gold in Bear Creek, there was gold in Mission Creek, and to the northern part of the Okanagan there was gold in Monashee Creek and so on.
So the fact that this is a lost McLean mine is that he kept it a secret. Nobody else could find it or has found it since.
That's right. People tried to follow him, but being an Indian, well-versed with the bush, he was able to give them the slip very, very easily. And of course, with his death, he died in an accident, with his death, the secret of the mine disappeared. He left no maps that we know of. He left no written knowledge. Whether he was literate or not, we're not sure. And certainly he did not tell anyone. So the lost McLean mine went to the grave with McLean.
Did he continue to have gold up until the time of his accident?
Evidently, yes.
So there's still some gold in Emnar Hill somewhere.
Yes, could be a high, dry channel that only runs in the spring, you know, so it'd be a spring freshet. It may be 100 feet above the present creek. We don't know. Placer gold is a strange sort of thing.
And it would not be immediately evident. That small amount of gold wouldn't leave big tailings of gravel or anything?
He could cover that probably very, very easily. He's probably right on bedrock. He would just cover it over again.
There are lots of incidences of these kinds of mines, these kinds of somebody's little personal storehouse of gold.
That's right. You know, we've discussed it before, Mike, and out of every 100 stories I research concerning lost mines and treasures, about 7 are worth retelling, so that most of them are exaggerated or non-existent. But there are some that do really exist. So this is one of them that I think is worthy of relating again.
Yeah, are they worth spending a lot of physical energy going out and beating the bushes for, or is it something you have to stumble on? How much is stumbling on?
Usually people stumble across them by accident. Most of the treasures, I think out of the last 12 treasures that have been found in the Northwest, that would be in the northwestern part of the United States and in British Columbia, I think 9 of them were stumbled on by sheer accident.
Yeah, we heard about the can up in the Kootenays that was on top of one of the braces in the mine that somebody found there. What did he find there?
Well, that's a long story, and we will probably relate that at considerable length next year, because we have a lot of interesting stories coming in the next year.
Where are we going to go next year?
Well, 3 or 4 places come right to mind. First of all, we'll go into the Caribou, which is the central part of British Columbia, and old names like Barkerville and Stanley and Williams Creek and Lightning Creek and Jacko Clubs and Nelson Creek and Slough and fascinating characters like Caribou Cameron and Billy Barker and John Rose and all these storied prospectors of the 1860s and 1870s come to mind.
Who would think we could do a year's worth of shows and not mention any of those people yet?
Yeah, well, there's so much material to go over. That's why. So we kind of held that back.
we haven't done anything. We've done a little bit in the United States, a couple of shows. Is there much more to say about the United States Northwest?
A lot. We'll be going into northeastern Washington again next year and covering old towns like Lead Point and Boundary and some towns that still exist, such as Northport, that are kind of forgotten. They're off the main. Towns that have disappeared under Lake Roosevelt, such as Old Marcus. And a lot of that fascinating mining country, Indian country, some lost treasures, some lost mines in there as well. And also east of the Rockies.
East of the Rockies, what did they ever find worth in the ground in Alberta anyway?
Well, Alberta, of course, is a fascinating area, and parts of it are absolutely intriguing, different than British Columbia. For instance, readily comes to mind is southeastern Alberta, that Milk River country, writing on Stone Park and the old mounted police fort down there, and that is the real Badlands of Alberta. That's where the rustlers came across on the Montana side and drove cattle and horses across, and the mounted police were trying to stop them at the coulee. And you have hoodoos there, you have Horse Thieves Cave, you have buffalo jumps. Very, very intriguing area.
Sounds very much a different genesis than the history in British Columbia. Different people.
You're walking in the buffalo country in that when you get down to that country.
And was it gold for those people as well? Did much gold come down the east side of the Rockies?
No, very little, very little. They talk about the lost lemon, but that was probably from the Wild Horse.
Silver was on the east side of the Rockies?
Not much.
No?
No, and unless you go far, far east on the Canadian Shield.
You've seen a skull from that country.
Yeah, that came from Horse Thieves Cave, and we'll be detailing the various parts of that particular story when we touch on that Milk River country.
Well, it's been a very interesting year of Gold Trails and Ghost Towns, and the response to the program from people has been remarkable. They say, I had an uncle who was an engineer in that country. They've wanted to say, we've a fascination with that country the way you have.
Yeah, I'm surprised. People are really quite intrigued with the Old West.
Do they actually want to go out, take the pan, and actually find the gold, or is it the story that's important?
I think both. You know, I mean, a lot of people who never get out much like to try their hand at panning. They like to get out and walk the old trails or the old stagecoach roads, and I think there's this kind of a special feel for history in the West.
Well, names that you've brought to my attention that I've not known before, like Volcanic Brown. I wonder how he got the name.
Yeah.
Those are the things that keep this fascinating.
Yeah, he called himself the finest prospector in the world.
He was a very low-key, gentle soul.
Yes, indeed. He was very modest.
Bill Barley, thank you for being our guide for Gold Trails and Ghost Towns.
Thanks, Mike.
Is there any limit to the number of shows that can be done on this?
No, we have probably several hundred we could do. We probably won't, but we could do.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bill Barley, our guide for Gold Trails and Ghost Towns, and we'll be coming back again to tell a bunch more stories, and we invite you to join us then when Gold Trails and Ghost Towns return.